The steady drum of rain against umbrellas filled the busy downtown Seattle streets as Dr. Maya Patel hurried past the evening crowd. Her blue hospital scrubs were partially hidden under her rain jacket, and her mind was already drifting toward the warm cup of tea waiting at home after her grueling 12-hour shift at Pacific Northwest General. The October wind whipped around corners, turning umbrellas inside out and sending loose papers flying from nearby newspaper stands. Maya checked her watch, 7:45 p.m. If she hurried, she could catch her favorite takeout place before they closed. Her stomach growled at the thought. She'd barely had time for half a sandwich during her hectic shift in the emergency room. That's when she heard the gasps and confused murmurs from the crowd ahead. Through the sea of umbrellas and raincoats, she spotted something that made her heart skip a beat. A small figure crumpling to the wet sidewalk like a puppet with cut strings. Without thinking, Maya dropped her bag and pushed through the growing circle of onlookers. "I'm a doctor. Please let me through," she called out, her professional instincts taking over as she knelt beside the fallen child. He was small, maybe 6 or 7 years old, with a bright yellow raincoat that made him look like a fallen sunflower on the gray concrete. His skin had an alarming bluish tint, and his chest barely moved with shallow breaths. Maya's training kicked in automatically as she checked his pulse, weak and irregular. "Someone call 911," she shouted, her voice carrying the authority that came from years of handling emergency situations. A woman in a business suit immediately pulled out her phone, while an elderly man held his umbrella over Maya and the boy, sheltering them from the persistent rain. "Hey buddy, can you hear me?" Maya spoke softly but clearly as she began her assessment. The boy's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. A quick check of his pupils with the small penlight she always carried showed they were responsive, a good sign. But his heart rhythm worried her. Through the growing crowd, a woman's panicked voice cut through the rain. "Ricky, my boy." A young mother in a waitress uniform pushed forward, dropping to her knees beside them. "I just turned around for a second to lock up the diner. He was right there with me." Tears mixed with raindrops on her face as she grabbed her son's small hand. "What's his full name?" Maya asked, maintaining her professional calm while continuing to monitor the boy's vital signs. "Ricardo Flores. Everyone calls him Ricky. He's 7. Please, is he?" "I'm doing everything I can," Maya assured her, hearing sirens approaching in the distance. "Has Ricky ever had any health problems? Any heart issues?" The mother shook her head, clutching a small backpack decorated with dinosaurs. "No, never. He's always been healthy. He was just tired after school, but I had to bring him to work." Maya noticed subtle signs that made her medical instincts tingle. The slight swelling in his neck veins, the way his chest moved. She'd seen similar symptoms in her cardiology rotation, but in a child this young. The wail of sirens grew louder as an ambulance rounded the corner, its red lights painting the rain-slicked streets in pulses of crimson. Maya looked up at the gathering crowd, now holding their phones and umbrellas like a solemn audience to this sidewalk drama. But she barely noticed them. Her world had narrowed to the small boy in the yellow raincoat, his mother's tight grip on his hand, and the steady count of compressions if his heart decided to stop. This wasn't just another emergency for Maya. Something about this boy, this moment in the rain, felt different. As the paramedics jumped out with their equipment, she didn't know she was about to become part of a story that would unfold over decades. A story that would change not just her life, but the lives of so many others in ways she couldn't imagine. The emergency room buzzed with its usual controlled chaos as paramedics wheeled Ricky through the automatic doors. Dr. Maya ran alongside the gurney, briefing the ER team while Ricky's mother, Anna, followed close behind, her work apron still tied around her waist. The boy's yellow raincoat was now carefully folded across her arms like something precious. 7-year-old male, collapse on the street, irregular heartbeat. Maya reported to Dr. Patel, the attending physician. She might have finished her shift, but there was no way she was leaving now. Something in her gut told her to stay, to see this through. The team worked with practiced efficiency, connecting monitors and starting an IV line. Ricky's eyes fluttered open briefly, confusion clouding his young face. "Mom?" he called out weakly, his small hand reaching into empty air. "I'm here, my amor." Anna rushed forward, but a nurse gently held her back as the medical team needed space to work. Maya could see the terror in the mother's eyes, the way her fingers twisted the fabric of the raincoat until her knuckles turned white. The cardiac monitor beeped steadily but irregularly, confirming Maya's initial suspicion. Dr. Patel studied the readings with growing concern. "We need an echocardiogram, stat," he ordered, then turned to Maya. "Good catch out there. This doesn't look like a simple fainting spell." As they waited for the cardiac specialist, Maya stayed with Anna, who seemed to be barely holding herself together. "I should have noticed something was wrong," Anna whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "He's been so tired lately, but I thought it was just school." "You couldn't have known," Maya assured her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Kids can be tired for many reasons. You got him help when he needed it. That's what matters." The next few hours passed in a blur of tests, consultations, and worried waiting. The cardiac specialist, Dr. Chen, finally emerged from examining Ricky with a serious expression that made Maya's heart sink. She'd seen that look before. "Mrs. Flores," Dr. Chen began gently, "your son has a condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. It's a rare heart condition where the heart muscle becomes unusually thick, making it harder for the heart to pump blood properly." Anna gripped Maya's hand tightly as Dr. Chen explained further. "The good news is, we caught it early thanks to Dr. Maya's quick response. The bad news is, Ricky will need surgery. But I've treated many cases like this, and with proper care, children with this condition can live normal, healthy lives." Maya watched as relief and fear battled across Anna's face. "But the cost," Anna started, her voice trembling. She still hadn't changed out of her diner uniform, and Maya could see the worry lines deepening on her forehead. That's when Maya stepped forward. "I know some people," she said firmly. "There are programs, foundations that help families in situations like this. We'll figure it out together, okay?" The look of pure gratitude in Anna's eyes made Maya's throat tight with emotion. As if sensing they were talking about him, Ricky chose that moment to wake up properly for the first time since his collapse. "Mom?" he called out again, stronger this time. Anna rushed to his bedside, smoothing his dark hair back from his forehead. "I'm sorry I scared you," Ricky whispered, his voice small but clear. "Can we still get ice cream after your work like you promised?" The room filled with gentle laughter, breaking the tension that had built up over the past few hours. Even Dr. Chen cracked a smile. "Maybe not ice cream today, champion," he said kindly, "but if you're good about taking your medicine, we can talk about ice cream very soon." Maya watched the scene unfold, feeling oddly protective of this small family she'd stumbled upon in the rain. Before leaving, she wrote her personal number on a slip of paper and pressed it into Anna's hand. "Call me if you need anything," she insisted. "Anytime." As Maya finally headed home in the early hours of the morning, the weight of her involvement in Ricky's story settled over her like a warm blanket. She didn't know it then, but this was just the beginning of a connection that would reach far beyond this rainy Seattle night, touching lives in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. Life has a way of moving forward, even after the most dramatic moments. The seasons changed, and Seattle's rain turned to snow, then back to spring showers. Maya kept her promise to help Anna and Ricky, connecting them with medical foundations and often checking in during Ricky's recovery from surgery. But gradually, as Ricky grew stronger and healthier, the urgency of those first few months faded into the gentle rhythm of everyday life. One crisp morning, while reviewing patient files in her office, Maya received an unexpected call. It was from Boston General Hospital, offering her a position as head of their new pediatric cardiology unit. The opportunity was incredible, a chance to work with cutting-edge treatments and help even more children. But accepting meant leaving Seattle, leaving the familiar halls of Pacific Northwest General, and leaving behind the young boy whose life she'd helped save. Before making her decision, Maya visited the small diner where Anna worked. The bell of the door chimed as she entered, and the smell of fresh coffee and warm bread filled the air. Anna was behind the counter, and 9-year-old Ricky sat at a corner table, completely absorbed in his science homework. Dr. Maya. Ricky's face lit up when he saw her. He rushed over, nearly knocking over his textbook in excitement. The scar from his surgery was barely visible now beneath his collar, and his cheeks had the healthy flush that his mother had prayed for during those scary early days. "Look what I got on my science test." He proudly held up a paper marked with a bright red A+. "I want to be a doctor too, just like you." Maya felt her heart squeeze as she took in the moment. The proud gleam in Anna's eyes, the determined set of Ricky's jaw, the way he carefully tucked his test paper back into his folder. She knew then that she had to tell them about Boston. Anna insisted on serving Maya her favorite pie as they talked. "You have to go," Anna said firmly, wiping her hands on her apron. "Think of all the other children you can help." Her eyes were bright with tears, but her smile was genuine. "We'll be okay. You taught us to be strong." "But who's going to help me with my science questions?" Ricky asked, his lower lip trembling slightly. Maya reached into her bag and pulled out a brand new notebook. "I got you something special," she said, watching as Ricky carefully opened it. "Every week, you can write down your science questions in this notebook. Your mom can take pictures of the pages and send them to me. I'll answer every single one. I promise." The next few months passed in a whirlwind of packing boxes, saying goodbyes, and preparing for the move across the country. Maya threw herself into setting up her new life in Boston, decorating her apartment with photos of the Seattle skyline to remind her of where she'd started. Her new position at Boston General was everything she'd hoped for and more. She developed new treatment protocols, trained young doctors, and saved countless lives. But she never forgot her promise to Ricky. Every weekend, she'd settle into her favorite armchair with a cup of tea and open the emails from Anna, filled with pictures of Ricky's latest science questions and updates about his life. He joined the school science club. One message read, "The teacher says he asks the best questions in class." Another time, Ricky gave a presentation about hearts today. He used his own story as an example. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Maya kept every message, watching through these digital windows as the scared little boy in the yellow raincoat grew into a curious, compassionate young man. She didn't know then that fate had more surprises in store, that the story that began on a rainy Seattle street was far from over. One evening, as she sat in her office overlooking the Boston skyline, Maya opened an unusual letter that would connect these separate threads of her life in ways she never could have imagined. But that's another part of the story, one that would reveal just how wonderfully life circles can complete themselves, often when we least expect it. The Boston winter was beginning to thaw, bringing with it the first hints of spring when Maya's office assistant knocked on her door one Tuesday afternoon. "Dr. Maya, there's a letter here that might interest you," she said, holding out a cream-colored envelope. "It's from a medical resident, but there's something different about it." Maya looked up from her computer where she'd been reviewing patient files. Her office, now filled with 20 years of medical achievements and memories, caught the late afternoon sun. Photos of her family lined one wall, her husband David, their teenage daughter Lily, and countless pictures of young patients whose lives she'd touched over the years. Taking the envelope, Maya noticed the careful handwriting immediately. Most communication came through email these days, making this handwritten letter stand out even more. As she opened it, a familiar feeling washed over her. the same instinct that had made her stop on that rainy Seattle street 2 decades ago. Dear Dr. Maya, the letter began. You may not remember me, but 20 years ago, you saved a young boy who collapsed on a Seattle sidewalk. I'm writing because I'm now a medical resident at Massachusetts General Hospital, and I've been following your research on pediatric heart conditions. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she read on. The letter was from Ricky Flores. Though their notebook exchanges had gradually decreased as he entered his teenage years, she'd never forgotten him. Anna still sent Christmas cards with updates, but this was different. This was Ricky reaching out as a fellow medical professional. She read the letter 3 times, each time catching new details. Ricky wrote about how that night had shaped his entire life, how he'd chosen cardiology because of her, and how he followed her published papers throughout medical school. But it was the last paragraph that made her catch her breath. I've recently been working on a research project about genetic markers in early-onset heart conditions. Some of our findings might be relevant to your current work. Would it be possible to meet and discuss this? There's something important I need to share with you. Maya leaned back in her chair, memories flooding back. She remembered the science notebook, Ricky's endless questions, the way his mind had always worked 3 steps ahead. What had he discovered that was so important he needed to tell her in person? She reached for her phone, then stopped. This moment deserved more than a quick call. Instead, she pulled out her own stationery, cream-colored paper she kept for special occasions, and began to write. Dear Dr. Flores, though you'll always be Ricky to me. As she wrote, inviting him to meet at her favorite coffee shop near the hospital, Maya couldn't help but smile at life's strange circles. Outside her window, medical students hurried across the hospital campus, their white coats fluttering in the spring breeze. One of them could have been Ricky, all grown up, following the path that started on that wet Seattle sidewalk. That evening, as Maya drove home, she told David about the letter over their hands-free car phone. It's amazing, she said, navigating through Boston's busy streets. Remember all those stories I told you about my last year in Seattle? About the boy in the yellow raincoat. The one who used to send you science questions? David asked. Of course I remember. You kept all those notebooks. He's here in Boston, a medical resident now. He wants to meet about some research. Maya's voice trailed off as she recalled something else, a nagging worry about Lily that she'd been pushing to the back of her mind. Their daughter had been complaining about feeling tired lately, just like. Maya shook her head, pushing the thought away. But as she pulled into their driveway, she couldn't shake the feeling that this letter was more than just a happy reunion. Something about Ricky's words, something important I need to share, echoed in her mind. As she stepped out of the car, the evening air crisp with early spring, Maya didn't know she was about to uncover a truth that would change not just her life, but her entire family's future. The real question wasn't why Ricky had reached out after all these years. It was what he had discovered that couldn't wait. The small coffee shop buzzed with quiet morning chatter as Maya arrived 15 minutes early. She chose a corner table near the window, where spring sunlight streamed in, warming the worn wooden surface. Her hands cupped a hot latte, but she barely noticed its taste. Her mind kept wandering to the young boy in the yellow raincoat, trying to imagine him as a grown medical resident. The bell above the door chimed, and Maya looked up. A tall young man in a white coat stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room. She would have known him anywhere. He had Anna's warm brown eyes and the same determined set to his jaw. But now those features belonged to a confident professional, not the small boy who once peppered her with science questions. Dr. Maya, Ricky said softly, and his voice carried all the years between then and now. Maya stood up, and without hesitation, Ricky stepped forward to hug her. Look at you, she said, stepping back to take him in properly. A doctor's coat suits you. They sat down, and for a moment neither spoke. 20 years of memories hung in the air between them. Notebook pages filled with questions, Christmas cards, school achievements, and that rainy night that started it all. My mom still talks about you all the time. Ricky smiled, pulling out his phone to show a recent picture. Anna looked barely changed, still wearing her diner uniform, but now she owned the place. She named a sandwich after you, the doctor's special. They laughed together, and some of the tension eased. But Maya could see something serious hiding behind Ricky's smile. Your letter mentioned research findings, she prompted gently. Ricky's expression turned professional. Yes, I've been studying genetic markers in heart conditions similar to mine. He pulled out a tablet, bringing up charts and data. We found something interesting. A genetic pattern that shows up in families, often lying dormant for generations before appearing. Maya listened intently as Ricky explained his research, pride mixing with growing concern. His work was brilliant, showing the same attention to detail that had filled his childhood science notebooks. But something in his tone made her heart beat faster. Dr. Maya, he said finally, meeting her eyes. When you saved me that night, you didn't just save my life. You gave me a purpose. I've dedicated my research to understanding why children like me develop these conditions. He paused, taking a deep breath. Last week, I was reviewing some patient files from Boston Children's Hospital, and I saw something that made me reach out to you immediately. Maya's hands tightened around her now cold coffee cup. What did you find? Your daughter Lily's latest checkup results were in the system. The symptoms she's been showing, the fatigue, the irregular heartbeat. Ricky's voice was gentle but firm. They matched the early warning signs we've identified in our research. The same signs I had before that night in Seattle. The world seemed to tilt slightly. Maya, who had spent decades delivering difficult news to parents, now found herself on the other side of the conversation. You're sure? She whispered. Ricky reached across the table, covering her hand with his. That's why I came to you first. With early intervention, we can prevent what happened to me. And he smiled slightly. I happen to know one of the best pediatric cardiologists in the country. Maya let out a shaky breath, doctor mode kicking in even through her worry. We'll need to run tests, start monitoring. I've already lined up the best genetic testing lab, Ricky said, and I've been developing a new treatment protocol specifically for cases like this. Together, we can help Lily before she ever has to go through what I did. Looking at him then, Maya saw not just the boy she'd saved, but the doctor he'd become. Life had brought them full circle, but with a twist she never could have imagined. As they began planning Lily's care, Maya realized that sometimes the greatest gifts come back to us in unexpected ways. The coffee shop continued its morning bustle around them, unaware that at this small corner table, two doctors, once a savior and a patient, were writing the next chapter of their intertwined story. That evening, Maya's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she drove home. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, but she barely noticed its beauty. Her mind raced with everything Ricky had shared, every symptom he pointed out that she'd somehow missed in her own daughter. The garage door hummed open as she pulled in, and through the kitchen window, she could see Lily setting the table for dinner. Such a normal sight, her 15-year-old daughter doing her regular chores. But now Maya noticed things she'd been unconsciously avoiding. The way Lily moved a bit slower than usual, how she had to pause and steady herself against the counter. David met her at the door, his usual warm smile fading when he saw her expression. What's wrong? He asked quietly, drawing her into the hallway before Lily could notice. Maya took a deep breath. Remember I told you about meeting Ricky today? She pulled out the medical files he'd given her, her doctor's training helping her keep her voice steady even as her heart ached. He's found something we need to talk about. All of us. The kitchen timer beeped and Lily called out, Mom. Dad, dinner's ready. They gathered around the table, steam rising from the pasta Lily had proudly prepared. Maya watched her daughter twirl spaghetti around her fork, remembering countless other family dinners that had seemed so ordinary. How many signs had she missed while living their everyday life? "So," Lily said between bites, "how was your meeting with your former patient, the one who became a doctor?" Maya exchanged a look with David, who nodded encouragingly. "Actually, sweetheart, that's something we need to discuss." She reached across the table, taking Lily's hand. "Ricky, Dr. Flores now. He's been doing research on heart conditions like the one he had as a child." Lily put down her fork, her bright eyes, so much like her father's, growing serious. "Is this about why I've been feeling so tired lately?" The directness of the question caught Maya off guard. Sometimes she forgot how perceptive her daughter was. "Yes," she answered honestly. "His research shows that conditions like his can run in families. And some of your recent symptoms match the patterns he's identified. So, I might have what he had." Lily's voice wavered slightly, but her chin lifted in that determined way Maya knew so well. "We need to run some tests to be sure," David said, his hand finding Lily's other hand across the table. "But if you do, we caught it much earlier than in Ricky's case. And your mom, she's one of the best heart doctors there is." Along with Dr. Flores, Maya added, managing a smile, "He's developed new treatments specifically for cases like this. We're not going to let anything happen to you, honey." Lily was quiet for a moment, absently pushing pasta around her plate. "Mom," she finally said, "if you hadn't saved Ricky that night in Seattle, if he hadn't become a doctor and done this research, then he wouldn't have recognized the pattern." Maya finished softly. "Sometimes life works in mysterious ways." "Can I meet him?" Lily asked suddenly. "Dr. Flores. I want to hear about his experience. And I have some questions." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes, remembering a young boy with his science notebook full of questions. "Of course you can. In fact, he specifically asked to talk with you. He said it might help to meet someone who's been through this and come out stronger." The rest of dinner passed in a blur of questions, explanations, and plans. Lily, showing a strength that amazed her parents, insisted on understanding everything about the tests she'd need and the possible treatments. She even pulled out her phone to start making notes, just like Maya did with her patients. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Maya stood in her daughter's doorway watching her sleep. David wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood there together, their shadows long in the hallway light. "She's going to be okay," David whispered. "Thanks to a rainy night in Seattle and a little boy in a yellow raincoat who grew up to be exactly the doctor we needed." Maya leaned back against him, feeling the weight of the day, of the past, of the future all at once. Sometimes the biggest revelations in life aren't just about what we discover. They're about how past actions ripple forward in time, touching lives in ways we never could have imagined. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of medical tests and hospital visits. The familiar halls of Boston General felt different now that Maya walked them not just as a doctor, but as a mother. Each time Lily had to roll up her sleeve for another blood draw or sit through another scan, Maya felt her heart tighten. But Lily surprised everyone with her resilience. "It's kind of like a science experiment," she said one morning, adding another colored sticky note to the calendar where she tracked her symptoms and test results. "Except I'm the subject." Ricky had become a constant presence in their lives, stopping by during his rounds to check on Lily's progress. One afternoon, he found her in the hospital's family room, surrounded by textbooks. "Studying hard?" he asked, taking a seat beside her. "Biology test next week," Lily replied, then grinned. "Did you know my mom used to help you with science homework too?" "She did more than that," Ricky said, pulling something from his white coat pocket. It was an old, worn notebook, its pages yellow with age. "Look at this." Lily carefully opened it, finding pages filled with childish handwriting and Maya's neat responses. "You really asked a lot of questions," she laughed, flipping through. Just like you do now, Ricky smiled. Your mom never minds explaining things, does she? Never, Lily agreed, even when I asked the same thing 3 times. They were still looking through the notebook when Maya found them later. She paused in the doorway, watching as her past and present collided in the most beautiful way. Her daughter and her former patient, now her colleague, sharing stories and laughs despite the serious situation that brought them together. The test results came back on a Tuesday morning. Maya and David sat with Lily in Dr. Chen's office, the same doctor who had treated Ricky all those years ago in Seattle, now the head of cardiology at Boston General. The diagnosis confirmed what they'd suspected. Lily had inherited the same condition Ricky had battled. But this time was different. They'd caught it early, thanks to Ricky's research. The treatment plan he developed, combined with Maya's expertise, offered hope that hadn't existed 20 years ago. I have one condition, Lily announced after Dr. Chen finished explaining the treatment options. Everyone looked at her in surprise. I want to document everything. Every test, every treatment, every outcome. Maybe it can help other kids someday. Maya felt tears fill her eyes as Ricky handed Lily a brand new notebook. Already thought of that, he said. I did the same thing during my treatment. It's actually what inspired my research. That evening, the family gathered in their living room, joined by Ricky, and through a video call, Anna from her diner in Seattle. The distance between them seemed to disappear as they shared hopes, fears, and plans for the future. Remember when you promised to answer all my science questions? Ricky asked Maya. Now we're both going to answer Lily's. Anna wiped tears from her eyes on the screen. My son and his doctor, now helping her daughter. God works in mysterious ways. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, already making notes in her new notebook. Her first entry read, Day 1 of becoming part of something bigger than myself. As the evening wound down, Maya found herself in the kitchen with David, watching through the window as Ricky and Lily walked in the backyard. Ricky was pointing at the stars, probably explaining something scientific, while Lily scribbled in her notebook. You know what's amazing? David said softly. 20 years ago, you saved his life. Now he's helping save our daughters. But it's more than that. They're both going to help save other lives too. Maya nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The crisis they faced was real and scary, but they weren't facing it alone. They had knowledge, they had treatment options, and most importantly, they had each other. Through the window, she heard Lily laugh at something Ricky said, the sound carrying on the evening breeze. In that moment, Maya understood that sometimes our greatest challenges become our greatest gifts, connecting us in ways we never expected and giving us strength we never knew we had. 6 months into Lily's treatment, the hospital corridors had become like a second home. But today felt different. Maya watched as Ricky presented their new findings to the hospital board, his confidence reminding her of that determined little boy with his science questions. By combining our research data with Lily's detailed documentation, Ricky explained, pointing to the charts on the screen, we've identified early warning signs that could help diagnose this condition in children before it becomes critical. The boardroom was packed with doctors and medical researchers, all leaning forward in their chairs, absorbed by what Ricky and Maya had discovered. Together, they developed a screening protocol that could spot the condition in children as young as 5. Dr. Flores, one of the board members, asked, What inspired you to look for these specific markers? Ricky glanced at Maya before answering. 20 years ago, I was a kid who collapsed on a Seattle street. Dr. Maya saved my life that day. Now, her daughter's journey with the same condition has helped us understand how to save many more lives. After the presentation, Maya found Lily in the hospital's teen room, where she volunteered helping younger patients with their homework. Her daughter looked up from where she sat with a small boy, explaining math problems. The fatigue that had once clouded her eyes was gone, replaced by a bright spark of purpose. Mom, Lily called out. How did the presentation go? They're implementing the screening program in all major hospitals across the country, Maya said, her voice thick with emotion. Your documentation made the difference, honey. They could see exactly how the early intervention worked. The small boy tugged at Lily's sleeve. Is that why you're getting better? Because they found out early. That's right, Tommy, Lily smiled. And now doctors can help other kids like us even sooner. Want to see my special notebook? Maya watched as her daughter pulled out her now-filled notebook, showing Tommy how she tracked her progress with colorful graphs and stickers. What had started as a way to cope with her diagnosis had turned into a template for young patients everywhere. Later that afternoon, Maya's office filled with an unexpected celebration. David arrived with cupcakes from Lily's favorite bakery, and Ricky brought a surprise. A video call with his mom Anna, who held up a sign reading congratulations. From her diner in Seattle. The doctor's special is on the house today, Anna announced proudly, in honor of all the lives you'll save together. As they celebrated, Maya's phone buzzed with messages from hospitals across the country, eager to implement the screening program. But the most touching message came from a mother in Chicago. My daughter's doctor found the condition early because of your protocol. Thank you for giving us a chance to prevent what could have happened. Lily, who had been reading over her mother's shoulder, squeezed her hand. We did that, Mom. All of us together. You know what this means? Ricky said, his eyes twinkling. We need a new notebook. A bigger one. Already got it. Lily pulled out a thick binder from her backpack. I've been thinking. What if we create a support network? Kids who have this condition could connect with each other, share their experiences, just like you did with me, Dr. Ricky. The room fell quiet as everyone took in Lily's words. Maya looked around at these people who had become so much more than doctor, patient, and family. They had become a force for change. I can help set up a website, David offered. Maybe even an app. And I can coordinate with other hospitals, Ricky added. Create a nationwide network. Maya watched as they excitedly planned, remembering that rainy night in Seattle that had started it all. One simple act of stopping to help had created ripples that were still spreading, touching more lives than she could have imagined. Dr. Maya? A nurse poked her head in. There's a young patient in the ER asking for you. She read about your program online. Maya stood up, straightening her white coat. Before leaving, she looked back at her daughter, now deep in discussion with Ricky about their next project. Sometimes the biggest miracles, she realized, come not from the lives we save, but from what those saved lives go on to do for others. 5 years later, the Grand Hall of Boston Medical Center buzzed with excitement. Banners announcing the Heart Heroes Foundation launch hung from the walls, and hundreds of people filled the seats. Doctors, patients, families, all connected by a story that began on a rainy Seattle street 25 years ago. Maya sat in the front row, her heart swelling with pride as she watched her daughter Lily, now 20 in pre-med at Boston University, step up to the podium. The years of treatment had been successful, and Lily had grown into a strong, passionate young woman with a mission. When I was 15, Lily began, her voice clear and confident, I learned I had the same heart condition that nearly took Dr. Ricky Flores' life when he was a child. But my story was different because of two amazing doctors, my mom, who saved Ricky's life all those years ago, and Ricky himself, who helped save mine. In the audience, Anna wiped tears from her eyes. She had flown in from Seattle, closing her diner for the first time in 25 years. The doctor's special sandwich was now famous, and its proceeds had helped fund several children's medical treatments. Today, Lily continued, we're launching more than just a foundation. We're creating a family. Our network already connects over 3,000 young patients across the country. Every child diagnosed receives a special notebook, just like the one Dr. Ricky and I used, to document their journey and contribute to ongoing research. Ricky, now the head of pediatric cardiology research, stood next to the podium. The app they had developed glowed on the giant screen behind them, showing real-time connections between young patients and their mentor buddies, survivors who helped guide others through their treatment. But the most exciting announcement, Lily smiled, is our new early screening program. Thanks to the data we've collected and the generous support of our donors, we'll be providing free heart screenings at schools across the country. No child should have to collapse on the street before getting help. Maya felt David's hand squeeze hers as they watched their daughter speak. On Lily's wrist, she wore a special bracelet, a gift from Tommy, the young boy she'd helped with math years ago. Now 13 and healthy thanks to their screening program, he sat in the audience with his own family. After the ceremony, families gathered in small groups, sharing stories and hope. Maya found herself standing with Ricky and Anna, watching Lily show a group of young patients how to use their special notebooks. Remember when he used to fill those notebooks with questions? Anna asked, her eyes twinkling. Now look at him, Dr. Flores, saving lives just like you saved his. We all save each other, Ricky said softly. That's what family does. As the evening wound down, Maya walked through the hall, reading the stories posted on the Wall of Hope. Each one started differently. A routine screening, a worried parent, a lucky catch. But they all shared the same thread of connection to that rainy night in Seattle. The last display held a worn yellow raincoat, carefully preserved in a glass case. Beside it stood 3 notebooks: Ricky's original science notebook, Lily's treatment journal, and a brand new one waiting to be filled. Mom. Lily appeared at her side. The interview team is ready. They want to film us sharing our story for the Foundation's website. Maya smiled, remembering all the moments that had led to this one. Tell him to wait just a minute, she said, pulling her daughter into a hug. First, I want to tell you something I've never told anyone. What is it? Lily asked, curious. That night in Seattle, I almost walked past. I was tired, my shift was over, and it was raining so hard. But something made me stop. I've always believed it was more than just medical training. It was destiny. Lily looked at the yellow raincoat, then at Ricky talking with young patients across the room, and finally at her own reflection in the glass. Healthy, strong, and ready to carry their legacy forward. You know what, Mom? She said softly. Some things don't happen by chance. They happen because good people choose to do the right thing, and those choices create ripples that turn into waves of change. Together, they walked toward the interview setup, where their story would be shared again, not just as a tale of medical triumph, but as proof that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can transform countless lives in ways we never imagined.